Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to our webinar today on the state of data in Africa. We're glad you can join us. We know that data is very crucial for a lot of folks in their role, and so we are recording this for the purpose of folks who have also registered, might be joining in late, or would want access to this recording. And so just for your information, that the call is being recorded. If you don't feel comfortable being on video, please feel free to turn it off. As much as possible, we would love to also have you on video. A few housekeeping rules also before we begin. Please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. You're happy to drop questions into the chat at any point in time. We would also leave some time at the end for folks to ask any question they might have. All right. And with that, I am just going to go ahead and share my screen and we can begin. Awesome. So as I mentioned, this webinar is being hosted by Zerone Analytiqs. For folks who might be hearing Zerone Analytiqs for the first time, Zerone Analytiqs is your go-to data partner for everything on the African market. And so if you were looking for consumer or market analytics in any particular sector, you can reach out to Zerone Analytiqs or simply visit our website and engage with us. Now, at a glance, we know that the continent has over 1.4 billion people. And one of the things that is mostly difficult for people within the continent is how to get information. You know, when you go to a lot of the data analytics websites out there, we don't necessarily have data on Africa. But we know at Zerone that data is able to help us do a lot of things. And so we're currently, our data collection is currently in 4 African countries. We're in Ghana, we're in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And so if you are looking to expand your business into any of these locations, we're able to support you with data. If you are even a student researcher who is looking to do research that captures any of these geographic regions, we're also able to support you with that. So what do we offer at Zerone? Our big vision really is to provide data and insights from untapped markets in Africa. Our current focus is Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, as I mentioned. And we offer access to limitless data in your field or industry. We have a growing community of data analysts and change makers on our platform. We've been able to gather over millions of data points. At a go, if you launch a survey on our Zerone data platform, you can reach over 15,000 people in real time. And so it helps because you don't have to, create a Google survey or, a document and share around trying to amass, users or audience. Once you tell us the particular audience you want to reach, the particular geographic location, we can send it just with one click. They receive a push notification to go answer your specific survey. All you have to do is tell us what sort of audience you want to reach, and we can customize and tailor surveys just for you. So once again, when you want to access reports like the one we'll be presenting, you are assured that it's based off on authentic data because everyone we collect data from is verified using a national form of ID. We provide C-suite insight. And so when you take our report, you can, on a high level, see all the information there, get implementation and strategic recommendations. We also provide trends into the future, statistics, visualizations, and we also have expert consultants who can help you implement the insights in any of the reports you purchase from us. If you want to get the full access to the services we provide, I think the best would be to subscribe or create an account on our platform. That way you can view our reports, you can buy a report in any existing category, or you can also request a report to be custom made for you. We also allow folks to request data sets to be collected for you for a particular product or a service. So let's say you just released the product, you want to see how it's doing on the market, you want to get feedback from users, we can collect those data sets for you as well. So I've been talking about the Zerone Analytics platform, and simply if you go onto our website, this is how it looks. You can see a lot of reports if you click on the report side. So you can see reports like the Africa's digitization footprint. For folks interested in technology, we have the Ghana domestic airline market, which is a very in-depth report on everything from passenger traffic to, where airlines, what airlines are doing, what the industry is looking like, what the regulations are, etc. We also have another on, short stay rental in Kenya. So let's assume you want to buy property and use for Airbnb. This might be a report you're interested in. And we also have a report on the real estate industry in Ghana. So many categories on trending topics, markets, industry, sectors, products and consumer insights, and then countries and economies. So you can simply check out on our website, and just like I mentioned, log in, sign up, create an account, and subscribe to receive any reports we have. We support, like I said, our customers are mostly folks based in startups. So if you're a startup that is looking to enter a new market, you want to do a market research, because most of the time, 90% of startups who fail is because they don't have data and insights to enter the market and understand what the market is. So if you're a startup, you're launching a new product, you want to get data, reach out to us. We can help you do an in-depth market research on the market you are entering. We also support individuals and businesses looking for specific reports on our platform. And we are also working with a lot of educational institutions because, for a lot of folks within, especially the tertiary level institutions, you need to be doing research, market research, collect data. And so we support educational institutions also on that front. Or if, let's say you're a PhD student, a master's thesis student doing a big research, we can also support you on that. What makes us unique? We have experience and context in the African market. Cumulatively, we've supported over 800 plus entrepreneurs in Ghana and Kenya. We are registered as an authorized data collector and processor with the Ghana Data Protection Commission. We also have a growing data collection audience. And so that makes us unique. And also we would soon be launching our AI workspace, which would help you build your own reports. And so watch out for that as well. These are some of our current partners, clients, testimonials, and folks who trust us in terms of what we do. And so we're waiting for you to also join us, and become a client, a partner as we move on. I'm just going to leave this here. If you are on the call, you can simply scan this QR code, which will take you to the sign up on our web platform to access the reports, including the reports we will be sharing brief in a short while. So make informed decisions about the African market today with our data visualization, report generation, and our AI-powered platform. I'm just going to pause for a bit as people bring out their phones and scan the QR code. And as I mentioned, there are reports available, and we are also able to, do specific reports tailored for you. All right. And just to end, I would also share our contact details. And so you can see the phone number. If you want specific, you have specific questions at any point in time, email info@zeroneanalytics.com. I will personally reply to you, or you can also check out our website on zeroneanalytics.com. Remember, analytics is a Q, not a C. And so check us out, contact us. Our team is ready to serve you because we think your business deserves the world stage, and Zerone can empower your decisions with data. Thank you very much. And at this point, I would stop sharing my screen and give the chance for us to hear from Debbie and Desmond, who would be presenting insights on the state of data in Africa. A little brief introduction. Debbie is the Chief Operating Officer for Zerone Analytics. She supports all the operations that we are engaged in. And Desmond is also a legal expert in Ghana. He's a lawyer solicitor. He's also a professor at GIMPA, and so has a broad understanding of this topic. And he's also part of the Zerone executive team. And so Deborah, Desmond, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And please feel free to leave your questions in the chat.
Right, great. Thank you, Abby. Thanks so much for this great introduction. And just wanted to confirm if you can see my screen in the PowerPoint in slideshow rather than just in the PowerPoint format. So it's in slideshow format. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really, really excited to be discussing this topic. This is a very important topic that I think we've really, really we've not really delved into, and I think this is the right time for us to really go into the state of data in Africa and what its transformative power could be on the continent. So, as Abby mentioned, this is really on one of the reports that we recently published on our website. And so what we'll be covering today would be a major highlight on it. So if you want to go a bit into some of the deep dives, please feel free to purchase a copy of the report. So for our discussion today, what we'll be focusing on is we want to first take some time to really look into where Africa is in the data revolution. And then from there, we want to highlight what some of the gaps we have identified, how these gaps could actually be solved. And then in line with that, we want to touch on some of the opportunities that we see in the future within the data landscape on the continent. From here, we are going to switch gears a little bit, really touching on a very sensitive topic, which is data security and privacy trends on the continent. In addition to that, we'll dive a bit more into some specific applications of the data laws in Africa, and then look into some case studies or examples in different countries. So, kicking it off with the big question, where's Africa in the data revolution? Now, before I even go into the details of that, I just want us to take a step back and just look at where the world is currently. I'm sure if you just look around in terms of where you find yourself in, you realize that you've kind of been affected with some sort of digitization. So it's either you are shopping online. I mean, Amazon is the big thing now. People are buying things on Amazon. You are either communicating with some kind of technology. A lot of people are now using smartphones, using sophisticated laptops or tablets, and so many more. We seem to find ourselves in this kind of world that is full of innovations. And these innovations have actually largely been shaped by data. So with that, I'm sure things that have come on top of minds are like what generative AI. We've also seen things like machine learning, cloud computing, big data. But none of these just popped out of out of the blue. There was actually an evolution of what that started from a certain point in time to where we currently find ourselves today. So how has the economy, the digitized economy, evolved? Well, just looking back a few years ago in the 1960s, data wasn't really much of a big thing. But that's the first time we started hearing much about data or data processing was when computers were introduced in the early 1960s. Now, then we moved somewhere towards the 1990s. That's when the dot-com became a big thing. Internet was now the name of the game. A lot of people were doing shopping, online shopping. That's when all of this started springing up. And big data was that was the time when big data was first used. But the funny thing was that it was not used, the term there was just like a new term, big data, but nobody fully understood it in its entirety. Now, moving on to the 2000s, early 2000s, that's when we started seeing the rise of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and bringing a lot of people together. And that's when a lot of data started being generated. And around that time, the total amount of data generated hit about 1 zettabyte in the year. And when you think about zettabytes, I'm sure many people might be lost. What is zettabyte? You can think about what DVDs, about 250 million copies of DVDs, which a total of that data is what gives you about 1 zettabyte. So since then, we then moved to the 2010s, where big data actually became a big thing. Now, people were talking about analytics, big data analytics. What's happening? We need to analyze more data. We need more data. There was a call for more data. And then from there, we now find ourselves to where we see today, which is blockchain, the whole concept of cryptocurrency coming into place, AI evolved, and now today we are even hearing the term generative AI. So all these is what have sort of shaped the kind of digitized economy that we see today. And this is really, really important because the underlying part of this is that it is driving everyday decision making and even innovations in shaping the kind of modern economies that we are seeing today. And one of the big things that Clive Hamby mentioned was that data is the new oil. Back in the years when oil was sort of discovered, that was what people were using to earn lots of money. But now the main thing that is driving economic growth is really on data. So what are some of the examples? And you might relate to some of these things. Uber, Lyft, Bolt, the use of all these shared cars is really relying on real-time data. They look at how the weather is, how many people, the time, how many people are working at a specific point in time. All these data feed into their systems and help them to offer improved services for us. There's also healthcare improvements. I remember just a few years ago, COVID really hit us, but how researchers were able to come with a new vaccine was that they were able to study the patterns on SARS and other previous viruses to be able to come up with a COVID vaccine that has sort of helped us come back to a new norm. Now, data is also being used, especially in the Western world, for precision farming as a way to optimize crop yields. There's also financial inclusion. Now, this is something that is big in Africa, where we've sort of jumped the banking system, and now to be able to get more people within the financial ecosystem, a lot of like mobile money and other kind of innovative tools have been introduced, like the Momo in Ghana. And as a result of that, even people in rural areas are now able to access money that they otherwise would not have been if they were using the traditional system within the banking space. Now, the last example here is really smart grids. Now, smart grids is a new technology that is being used within the electricity space, where they are able to determine how much load is needed at a point in time. Say, let's say between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., a lot of people have moved to work, and so they are not living in their residential areas. So they'll shift the load from residential areas to business centers where they know that people are, so that they'll make sure that the energy is being optimized in the right way. So these are some of the importance of how data is being used in our modern economies. Now, as a result of all the things I've said, the current estimation on the amount of data generated globally is around 150 zettabytes. Now, if you remember when I started my conversation, somewhere in the early 2000s, we were around 1 zettabyte. But now we are producing about 150 zettabytes of data, and it's expected that by the end of this year, it's even going to grow to close to about 180 zettabytes annually. Now, about half of this, more than half of this, is actually generated by IoT, which is Internet of Things. And when I say IoT, it's really about anything that is any kind of device that is kind of connected to the internet system. And as a result of that, we are able to generate data. So think about if your car is sort of connected to some Wi-Fi or internet, and this is something that Tesla uses a lot. There is data being generated, your computer, your phone, any kind of technology. Think about your home, your fridge, anything that is connected to internet, it is generating some amount of data. And so with that, we want to answer the question that I started with. Where is Africa in the data landscape? Now, as I just spoke about the IoT, what the underlying thing here is that the onset of internet is what has driven a lot of data generation across the globe. And so when we really want to pinpoint where Africa is in the data landscape, we want to first look at where Africa is in terms of internet penetration versus the world. Now, when you look at the graph on the left side, you can see that Africa is kind of lagging behind with just about 37% of internet penetration, while the rest of the world is hovering above 70%. On the right side, if you look at the global chart here, you can see that just about two countries, which is Nigeria and Egypt, they have sort of crossed around the 60 to 69% frame of internet penetration, but majority of the countries on the continent are below this range. And this is something that is really, really affecting Africa. Now, the next key item here is on the in terms of data centers. And I bring data centers because data centers are infrastructure that sort of house all the kind of data that is generated. And it's a key infrastructure that helps countries in terms of storage and even distribution of data. So when we match Africa to where the world is, we see that Africa is really, really nowhere compared to the rest of the world. We have just under 1% of data centers as compared to the world, and in total that is sort of equivalent to about 175 data centers, majority of which are found in South Africa. And so what this tells us is that Africa really has a lot of catching up to do if we really want to bridge that gap and also catch up in terms of the becoming a more modernized continent. Now, what are some of the data gaps that we've seen, or what are some of the drivers that we've seen here? The first thing really is inadequate infrastructures, and this is really tied to the data centers I just mentioned. So we do not have enough of this, and without enough of this, we cannot even store any kind of data that is generated on the continent. The next big thing here is skills and inadequate skills. So when compared to the rest of the world, Africa is a place where we do not have enough data engineers, data scientists, analytics, any of those kind of things. It's not something that is sort of incorporated within our educational system. And as a result of that, there are lots of gaps within the space with people even trying to analyze data, understand what it is, and the whatnots along those lines. The next thing really is a big issue on data quality and reliability issues. Even with the data that is generated, we cannot rely on it. And this is a big problem that the World Bank continues to face, and even other institutions like the IMF, that the data that let's say the Ministry of Finance might generate, there are still questions around that. Like, is this data that can be relied on? Can we really make good decisions as a result of this data that has been pulled from government institutions? The last thing here I want to talk about is on weak data protection laws and regulations. And this is something that is a sensitive topic, as I mentioned when we started, and an area that my colleague is going to cover at the end of my presentation. So now moving on to the next session, how can we solve these gaps? It's very important that we think about ways to solve this gap so that Africa can quickly catch up to the rest of the world. And the answer is very simple. We just have to flip the problems and look at them rather than problems as ways of as solutions. So the first thing here is really we need to develop a robust infrastructure to be able to gather data and even store this data. And so what that means is we need more data centers. The second thing is really embracing technology. We need to be able to incorporate a lot of technology to help us to generate the amount of data that we need to be able to bridge that gap. The next thing is to solve that inadequate skills, we need to invest in more education that are more geared towards data science, data engineering, and the likes. The fourth here is we need to tighten our data governance and regulation so that people can have more confidence in even offering their data and also feel protected. The last one here is that we need to promote data sharing and collaboration. In as much as, yes, data needs to be protected, one of the ways that innovation has come about is because data has been shared and there's been a lot of collaborations across countries, across regions, but definitely they need to be within the governance structure of the legal framework for data. So with that, the big piece is that we really need investment, and it all falls on enough financial capital. So all these ways I've talked about in terms of how we can bridge the gap, we need to have money, financial capital to be able to address these problems. And so we need to call on investors. We need to partner with the right institutions to be able to gather those funds to be able to put in and the right areas to help Africa bridge the gap. So the last area I want to touch on before I pass on to Desmond is what are the opportunities is in the future? The future holds a lot of immense potential. As I mentioned, the first one really is on investment, where we need to invest in human resources, technology, and even establishing more robust governance framework on data. And as those things are happening, we see high growth in data-driven decisions. So people are not just looking to enter into a new space without having informed data or without being informed. They need data to be able to drive decisions. And with that, they need not just any kind of data, but reliable data. And given the current economy that we find ourselves in, AI and big data is really now the name of the game, and they are going to drive development across different sectors. And so we need to kind of be poised for that and make sure that Africa is ready for the next phase of its trajectory. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Desmond to take us through the legal frameworks and some examples.
All right, thanks, Debbie. Can you guys hear me? I seem to have a connection issue that's often of the camera, but once you can hear me, then I'm okay. I can proceed.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, good. Okay. So yes, we're going to start off with some trends. But flowing from where Debbie got off, you're dealing with the gap situation. So how do you bridge that gap? She gave quite a number of examples. The idea here is, between data and insight is the gaps. We will all agree that the value of data itself lies in the insight that we are able to make out of it. So that's where you need to put things into perspective. What is the law interested in, or what are regulatory agencies interested in? In my practice of data protection, I've indicated that data protection is not a policing tool, it's actually a competitive tool. If you know how to position yourself, and that could help you build a rather better leverage. So currently you are looking at some of the needs or the importance that we've placed on data. Essentially, we are relying on data-driven technologies. Name them. Debbie went through a number of them, driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, if you like. You even in cybersecurity, we are dealing with threat intelligence that is backed by artificial intelligence itself, both intelligence anyway, and government decisions that are being made with vast amount of data. Even consumer profiling, you would agree with me at this point, is largely based on the insight that is gotten from data from different places, i.e. big data, because large volumes coming from diverse places, and coming in different formats or if you like data sets. Then that creates some sort of cybersecurity, concerns. There's a number of cyber threats happening around. In 2024 alone, you had so much cyber threats, cyber breaches that has occurred, and that's an emerging concern. If you are somebody who is a fan of following trends, you can check informationisbeautiful.net. That actually comes up with some beautiful trends on all the data breaches that have happened probably in the last 10 years, giving you a more pictorial view of the situation. So you see breaches from T-Mobile and all those giants across the world. So yeah, that actually brings the data conversation to the fore. One would ask, okay, what's the big deal? Yeah, it's a big deal because when there's data breach involved, there are actually two kinds of data in there. It's either personal data or non-personal data, and then there's the non-personal data will come with so many other angles in things like company data, things like data on the weather, and things like data on ecology and all that. So these are all different kinds of data, but the law is interested in data that concerns living human beings, right? Or living things. It's only in South Africa that the POPIA, which is their personal information, protection of personal information act, deals with artificial persons, i.e. company data. But largely, most African countries only look at the data that concerns human beings. And that's what we've come to know as personally identifiable information or personal data. Another growing importance is the fact that there's collaboration between government and private sector in the way we want to secure data. Even undersea cables, how they are laid, who is in control of them, intermediary liability between platform owners like the Facebooks, the internet service providers. It cuts across a number of things, and that leads us to some few trends that I think that we could look at. First, there's been a number of adoption of data protection laws in Africa. For the records, there are about 36 data protection laws in Africa out of 55 countries or 56, depending on where you sit. And this is not a yesterday's conversation. Ghana started off with this Data Protection Act as far back as 2012. And just for the records, Benin had this Data Protection Act in 2004. The likes of Cape Verde and Mauritius maybe even had it a little bit earlier, if my dates are correct. So that pretty much gives you almost a decade, if you're just looking at it from the 2000s to now. We've spent a decade of trying to put our data protection requirements together. So Africa did not start yesterday, but we've been very slow. And Debbie highlighted that we've been very slow, very, very, very slow. And I think it's more to do with how we put our infrastructure together, and where we usually don't put our money where our mouth is. That's the biggest problem that comes with most of these compliance and regulatory matters. So yes, you can look at Nigeria, for instance. I call them the latter-day saints. You have the Nigeria data protection regulations. You have a Kenya Data Protection Act. The POPA was there before these two, of course, and the Data Protection Act of Ghana was probably was there a few days before, or a few years, sorry, before the POPA was also passed. On the regional level, yes, we have a framework. You can refer to the Malabo Convention, which is the African Union Convention on Data Protection and Cybersecurity. Pretty much deals with personal data protection in there, and also try to address some few cybersecurity issues there. And then there is also the ECOWAS directive, if you are looking at it from a regional bloc point of view. And then ADC also have some few things around their trade. And in fact, in recent times, we're discussing Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. There's a protocol annexed to it, which also has a lot to talk about when it comes to personal data. There are provisions in the Digital Trade Protocol that discusses personal. So just to give you a perspective that the adoption of data protection laws is something that really is a talk about in Africa. There's a lot of action around it, but I'll discuss as we move forward. I would have time to discuss that more details. Other three trends that I would like you to also note whilst you're on this session is that there's a lot of conversation around cross-border data transfer. I actually wrote a paper on the impact of AI on cross-border data transfers. Why? Because every transaction that is happening today, and when I say transaction, I'm using it generally, all communication that is cutting across business, e-commerce, anything that is happening now, there's a lot of cross-border data transfer that is going on. Even with payment systems, with the incoming of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, there is also the payment exchange that is being used to support payments within Africa. And these are all cross-border data transfers. Consider even the use of social media, right? You sit in Ghana, you use Facebook, you use X, you use Instagram, you use Zerone, you still, you still communicate data across. So that pretty much deals with the cross-border data transfer issue. Also on data localization, just to touch on that a bit, and then I'll deal with the other two. Now, data localization essentially is saying that a country determines that its data can only be collected, processed within servers that are located internally. And when I say internally, I'm talking about within the country. If you follow global news, Russia tried that with LinkedIn, and that's how come LinkedIn packed out of Russia, because Russia insisted that LinkedIn should have Russian-based servers to host Russian user data on LinkedIn. I don't think that was an investment LinkedIn was willing to make. Also, that position was a national security position, which usually is the argument that the proponents of data localization make. Look at AI also. We're talking AI almost every day. I don't know how well you're using AI, whether as an end user or maybe a mid-level developer, level. That poses a lot of things. Even as an individual, there are a lot of questions that will come to your mind when you are using AI, Gen AI, or any sort of AI at all. You get scared along the way. Okay, how is this data being churned? How did it come about? How did he learn this? How can he unlearn that? What about data minimization? Is it going to still be consuming data as it goes? Of course, it's going to consume data. You're talking about AI. The only thing it knows is big data. So that's definitely going to happen. And then, of course, you have the public-private sector collaboration and a number of things going on. You can follow organizations like ISC2, which is the Consortium of Security Certification Organization in the United States. And they are churning out a lot of scholarships across, trying to get people to train on cybersecurity and become cybersecurity efficient, because we're dealing with a lot of global cyber threats, and for the geopolitics of it, everybody wants to make sure that their allies are well protected. So yeah, those are the trends that comes with the conversation. I think we can move on from here. Right. So let's look at the laws more specifically, and I'll try to be brief about that. We can discuss 36 laws tonight. So let's look at it generally. So on the overview, some of the things you need to look out for If as soon as you hear data protection and you're looking at the framework of what a data protection law should be like, then you should consider a few things like this. Is there a regulator there? So the law should specify a regulator. Trust me, not all the laws specify regulators. And sometimes they don't even create new regulators. They pass the regulation on to an existing regulator, say for like maybe an ICT agency or something like that. But for the most part, data protection laws would identify the regulator. Another point that you need to look out for is, are you required to do a registration? So would you be recognized within that jurisdiction if you don't have any formal registration? Because the law identifies what it calls a data protection register, which sort of identifies all data controllers and data processors. Now, data controllers are deemed to be the organizations or the entities that make the final decision on what the personal data is going to be used for. And then the data processor is the one who takes an instruction from a data controller on what to use the data for. A data processor do not include the agents or the employees, or if you like, the third parties that are within the internal structure of a data controller. They're always people who are actually third parties, properly so-called. They are not part of the organization directly. You could also look at the principles of data protection in there, between 6 to 8 principles, depending on which jurisdiction or which continent you're coming from. Ghana, for instance, deal with 8 principles, which cuts across most of the African countries that I've looked at. So they speak about things like accountability, lawfulness of processing, specification of purpose, which, for instance, Zerone will tell you that you're providing this information because we're going to, run a survey on that, maybe for educational purpose, for industry purpose. Your data is not being sold, that kind of thing. So that's specification of purpose. And then further compatibility with any other purpose that the information is going to be used for. You also look at the issues of data quality. These are provided under legislation or the law. You look at data security. You can look at data subject participation. Essentially, data subject participation is an extension of the rights of the data subject. Their right to access the data that you hold about them. Their right to stop you from processing that data. Their right to request for deletion. Their right to prevent automated decision-making being done on them. You can also look at enforcement regimes, within the laws. Take, for instance, the GDPR, speaking about 4% of your global turnover, and things like that, and different enforcement regimes, both administrative fines and also sometimes you could face litigation, from maybe the regulator or even the data subjects themselves, whose data that you're collecting. So when you're looking at the structure of a data protection law generally, and you want to do the comparison, these are some of the things that you can look at. They are not exhaustive. We can extend the conversation. It could be a whole day lecture, but I think this is worth something to pay attention to whilst you're looking at it. So the data subject rights, the enforcement regime, the presence of a regulator, the presence of whether or not you are going to register, and then the data protection principles that comes in there. You can compare it across board, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Ghana, whether it's Kenya, and the likes. I mentioned on the compliance, the enforcement aspect of it. So once the gaps are, identified, definitely you're going to have enforcement issues. Some of the things that you're faced with is limited resources to these agencies or these, if you like, regulators who would be able to ensure some level of, public awareness and accountability. I've always asked a very simple question. If a data protection commission or a data protection regulator do not have the expert auditors to go out there to audit, say, a data breach, how are they going to enforce that? they don't even have the capacity to do that. So that's going to be a problem. If they don't have the wherewithal in terms of the political will and the funding to educate their own masses in terms of the citizens, how are they going to do that? So the questions are actual real questions that needs to be answered, which leads us to emerging legal debates that have always come up. For instance, what's the role, of consent in data processing? And the question will go back to lawfulness of processing. What are the grounds on which you are processing that information? Consent is not the only grounds for processing and personal data. It is not. Most of the laws will tell you that if there is a legitimate interest, if there is a statutory obligation, of course, consent comes first, and under the GDPR is even held high, especially when it comes to sensitive or special personal data. You are required to seek consent from the data subject. But just so you know that legal debate is also premised on the fact that there could be other grounds on which data could be processed, and it would be lawful. And then, of course, another debate is the national security and individual privacy. Can the government ask your telco to give data that they hold about you? Can your government ask Zerone to give data that they hold about you? That is assuming Zerone holds any data about you. These are questions or issues that comes up, on a bigger national debate. And it always goes down to, constitutional rights and also the powers of the state to protect its citizens and the likes. And then it goes on and ends somewhere around digital trade agreements. I mentioned the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and data sovereignty. A place like Uganda, who is having already conversations for a while, probably in the last 5 years, about data localization. They've not materialized it, but the intention is there. They are taking steps towards that. How do they fit into the African continental free trade? How do you trade with them when the data is not supposed to cross borders? Or the data will cross borders based on some conditions which might even affect the trade relationship. So you guys just be thinking about these as you enter into the whole big data conversation in Africa. We can flip to the next one and look at a few of the issues there, and then probably we'll wrap up from there. Yes, so these are case studies I will just run through quickly. Huduma is a number which is a national identification number for those in Ghana. Ghana card is akin to Huduma, right? It's a digital ID implementation that would allow the Kenyan government to identify its individuals one after the other. Now, the Huduma came before the Data Protection Act of Kenya, right? So there has always been the question of, would the Kenyan government, violate the rights of citizens by just going into this database and finding who they want to find and maybe tailgating them and putting them on national security, tracking and all these. We've had all these conversations around some of these things and whether or not it should even be there. But the Data Protection Act came in and provided some safeguards and also provided grounds on which national security could access some of this information on the grounds of national security, just making sure that citizens' rights are generally protected. You can flip your chart to Nigeria. Currently, I'd say Nigeria and probably Nigeria and South Africa has the biggest enforcement going on. It's been a while I followed up on Mauritius, but it used to also be very big on enforcement. But Nigeria currently has a lot of cases in their courts. They're so progressive. They even have a data protection lawyers association that has been formed. And there's so many cases in their courts challenging so many things, from WhatsApp to internal services and all that. So the incoming of data protection itself and the whole idea of data in action is something that needs to be discussed. Reference back to 2022 Cambridge Analytica issues, about 59,000 records of South Africans were found in that scandal. The South African regulator actually took Facebook on. I have a copy of the summons that they issued, and maybe let me see if I can get the link. Just a minute. It's not going to take two. I'll just drop that in the chat just in case we have somebody who is curious and interested in looking at that chat. Yes, dropped it in the chat. You can just download it. You would see something like a presser, which is discussing the sounds there. Just a minute. I need to take some personal information out of the link. Okay, I just did. So that's it. That's it for Popier. You can see it right there. And then the Ghana Data Protection Act has also been a central part of shaping the fintech ecosystem. Just in case you are wondering how it's doing that, the regulator, which is Bank of Ghana, through its Fintech and Innovation Office, and through the Payment Services and Systems Act, or the Payment Systems and Services Act 2019, requires you to have a data protection license even before you operate as a fintech. And then the Data Protection Commission itself has some huge compliance requirements that would make sure that you fall in line and you're not playing around. The problem is always what I've mentioned already, the enforcement. But yes, there's room for improvement and there's work on the ground. And then finally, we have Debbie mentioned the data governance framework. There's actually a data governance framework at the African Union level, right? Where they are developing these to be able to harmonize the data protection regimes across board, and also to ensure that we could move from data silos to like a data regime that is more centralized. Something I consider worthy. If it's followed through, it could help in our artificial intelligence revolution, if you like to say it that way. So these are some of the case studies, just like I said, 39 data protection laws across out of 55 countries. But we can't discuss all, but these are very easy to follow and reference case studies. So what should be our wake-up call on this conversation? Harmonize. Yes, harmonize, 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 harmonize. We are 55 countries. If we're going to have different data protection laws with different regimes, how do we even, converge our digital trade, which we want to do so badly under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement? Everybody says, no, I want my data in my house. Everybody says, no, don't use the data. I think we need to have a regime that, yes, protects the rights of African citizens, but also ensures that innovation and the business aspect of data will thrive, because we are in the fourth industrial revolution. Whether we like it or not, we're dealing with digital economies, right? From Estonia to the United States, to the UK, to Canada, to China, to Japan, to Singapore, everybody is discussing digital trade, and everybody's discussing digital economies. So definitely our policymakers will need to play a role, and they don't need to play a passive role. When I say play a role, they need to sit up with businesses and civil society to be sure of the kind of laws that we are passing. For the greater part, most of the laws we've passed, to be honest, from where I sit as a policy researcher, has not really helped us. Yes, it hasn't. These are laws that I personally, and I hold that view strongly, that these are laws that were borrowed, and they were not borrowed with having an Afrocentric thinking in mind as to what are our peculiar needs, right? And what do we need to do? If you are late to the party, you don't start by discussing the makeup. You start by thinking, how are you going to get to the party on time to reduce the time. And that's the kind of conversation that we need to have. And finally, I think we should leverage on our own socio-economic context, which is what the point I'm trying to make about our policies and laws being borrowed. We need to move straight into looking at our own socio-economic context. Today, most of the contents on AI do not even reflect Africa, right? I have done a number of demos on AI hallucination. Whenever I want ChatGPT to reference laws in Ghana, for lack of a better word, it speaks nonsense. Most of the references it gives me, because I know the law so well, I know these things are not true. And I've used that to do more like a federated kind of active learning, by telling it that no, these laws are wrong. You need to read the act this way. And sometimes I even upload the act and ask it to read the act and tell me if it could correct the errors it made, and it does correct them. So I have these very fancy demos on AI hallucination, and I know that if we don't solve the problem of an Afrocentric data, an Afrocentric socioeconomic development towards our data, we might not really be getting anywhere. We'll just be playing the catch up. And I think that would be my wrap up on this. Debbie.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. At this point, we have ended our presentation, and I would hand over to Abby to take it up. We are open for questions, and we are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you so much, Debbie and Desmond. This was really eye-opening. Folks, if you are interested in learning more, as I said, we have the full report on this on our platform. You just have to go to zeroneanalytics.com to get more insights. This was just like a scrape on the surface. Mostly the reports we have go into details. The webinar is just to give an overview of some of the things you know you need to think about. Please feel free to use the hand raise function if you have a question, or you can also type it in the chat and I would read it out to our presenters today. But while folks do that, I just wanted to say that, you know, what does all of this mean for us? First of all, when Deborah was talking, she made mention of where the world is getting to and where we are as Africans. I think it's gotten to a point where as African industries, as organizations, we can't rely on guesswork. We need to use data to give us that competitive advantage we need in our work. And so don't just make decisions and policies in your workplace because, you know, I feel like that's what we should do. What does the data say? How can you support it with data and insights? And that's where, you know, Zerone Analytiqs come in. We are one of the private sectors supporting the growth when it comes to data. We want to change the African narrative and we want to support businesses rely and use data for the benefit of their organizations. I mentioned Desmond is one of our advisors sitting on our board. And so just like he was talking, you can imagine the highest security and the highest level of standard we hold ourselves to when it comes to security and just making sure that we are meeting every policy. We're building Africa to the level where we need to be. And we want to provide you the expert support to implement some of the insights, even after we've gathered the data for you. As I mentioned, when this one was also talking, he talked about, and I'm just summarizing everything that has gone on today. When he was talking about data trends and privacy, he said three things that stuck out for me is one, regulator, whether there's a regulator, data quality, and then purpose. So if you are giving your data, these are some of the things you know you might be asking yourself. For example, in Ghana, we know the Ghana Data Protection Commission, which Zerone Analytiqs is registered with. So those are some of the things that should come to your mind, even when you are giving your data. Don't give it just for giving sake. Make sure that you put some of the things to the test to check why is it being collected, how are they processing your data as well. And finally, the wake-up call Desmond left us with is one, a harmonized approach for Africa, having policymakers play a role and not just play any role, but have an Afrocentric thinking in the policymaking aspect as well. And then the final thing, you know, that I'm leaving here with is a quote he made, which is, if you are late to the party, think about how you will get to the party, not how you're going to do your makeup. And I think that hits home. We've gotten to a point where we need to start thinking about how we would play catch up, not how do we bring the fancy aspects. And that's really important. Thank you so much, Debbie and Desmond, for this insightful session. In the absence of any questions, I would end the session. We would have the recording on our YouTube for folks who want to take a look. And also, please visit Zerone Analytiqs website to take a look at some of the reports we have. If there's a specific industry you're working in which you would want a report in, feel free to reach out to us on info@zeroneanalytics.com and we'll be able to support you. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.